Joseph Goebbels was the Nazis' Minister of Propaganda and Enlightenment. He sold the population Nazi ideas through a clever mix of art, spin and showmanship. For those who resisted, however, the Nazis used a not-so-clever mix of violence...
Away from me! Stop touching me! You've got no right! Stop, no, you haven't! Can you get your back belly off me? No, I get to me, I'll just need stop touching me, please! No, you need to leave me the fuck alone! You need to leave me the fuck alone! No, I'm not about doing therapy! You want me alone! What do you mean make the move? What the fuck are you doing? Why are you not?
Don't touch his camera.
I'm having you, Sergeant! I'm having you! You're fucked!
Absolute bullies.
Yeah.
Look at him, just assaulting him.
Yeah.
It's like East Germany.
Yeah, it is. Marxist. They're issuing him with a fine.
People, isn't it?
Fining an old man that's on a pension. It is disgraceful. So they've got vans on the way.
Bodyguard, the SS, was expanded and used to terrorise critics, searching their houses and arresting them without trial. The Gestapo, secret police...
A former undercover police officer has admitted for the first time that the Metropolitan Police set out half a century ago to infiltrate left-wing political groups, even if they posed no threat to the public. The officer, the first to give evidence at a mammoth public inquiry, said his task had been to gather intelligence on any anti-establishment campaign group. He was a founding member of a squad that's accused of serial abuses over decades, including miscarriages of justice and tricking women into sexual relationships. Our Home Affairs correspondent Dominic Casciani heard him give evidence.
The elderly retired officer, codenamed HN329, was a founding member of Scotland Yard's now disbanded Special Demonstration Squad, known within the force as the Hairies. In 1968, he was ordered to infiltrate the movement against the Vietnam War that was then organising a massive protest march in London. He grew a beard, donned a jacket with a leopard print lining and blended into a network of radical left-wing campaigners led by the intellectual Tariq Ali. 329 said his job was to gather intelligence on groups who were challenging the political status quo, even if they were peaceful and harmless. He uncovered no crimes and he saw no violence, but his superiors were so concerned that a threat from subversives existed, they sent 9 officers to infiltrate just one anti-war meeting. Recollecting his career with the squad, 329 said his colleagues had been the finest members of Special Branch who'd done a proper job.
He's used a not-so-clever mix of violence, intimidation and murder. The Reich Chamber of Culture controlled art, music, literature and theatre, so that it all now promoted a message of Nazi supremacy and German greatness. Huge celebrations and rallies like those held at Nuremberg rammed the message home. The 1936 Berlin Olympics showcased what had been achieved in Germany to the world. Goebbels showed off new technology like television cameras and unveiled the world's largest stop clock, celebrating Nazi engineering. The Nazis took control of all forms of media, newspaper, print, radio and films. Nazi editors were put in place and any non-Nazi publications were closed down. In 1933 there were public burnings of books with undesirable views, including works by socialists, pacifists and Jews like Albert Einstein. The Nazis also used violence and intimidation. The German police were brought under Nazi control and were used against their opponents. Hitler's designed for questioning, torture and hard labour to force acceptance of Nazi views. These powers were turned on anyone who resisted or who the Nazis saw as a threat. All political parties apart from the Nazis were banned. 1933 to 34 saw a push to eliminate all opposition groups. Communists and socialists were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Trades unions were banned. Workers now had to join the Nazi-led German Labour Front, who would look after workers by making them do exactly as they were told. There was no freedom of the press, no freedom of expression, and no public meetings without Nazi approval. The Nazis even planned to replace the church. In 1936, all existing religious organisations were to be replaced with the National Reich Church. Increasingly, the concentration camps were used to detain and murder Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, or any other group the Nazis considered undesirable, regardless of their political beliefs. The Nazis controlled the German people with propaganda and terror. And those people they thought weren't German enough, they exterminated.
The Home Office has been strongly criticised for its handling of illegal migrants arriving in Kent after crossing the Channel. The Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration says the department failed to take decisive action to prevent people arriving in small boats and that it lacked the capacity and the capability to manage the situation effectively. Well, let's cross to Dover and get more from our reporter Leanne Lawless. And Leanne, it's fair to say this was a rather critical assessment, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. So this independent report by the Chief Inspector was looking at the issue of migrants crossing on small boats between May and December last year, and he concluded that there was no signs that illegal entry was reducing. He said, in fact, the evidence pointed that it was going in the other direction. He concluded that the Home Office neither has the capacity nor the capabilities, in particular in respect of criminal prosecutions, to manage this threat more effectively. He went on to say that if more decisive action had been taken earlier to demonstrate that attempts to cross by small boats would not succeed, then this route may not have become as embedded in the minds of migrants and the people smugglers as a way to try and cross the Channel effectively and illegally.
So what's the Home Office had to say in response, Leanne?
Well, they sent us a statement tonight saying they are cracking down on the vile people smugglers, and they say that since this report was published, they have set up a new threat command to try and coordinate the efforts between the government and the authorities in France. But of course, we know the situation isn't going away anytime soon. The latest figures out today show that 76 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats just today, and that now brings the total to more than 8,000 for this year alone.
Leanne, thank you.
It's Sunday, the 15th of November. I'm here in quarantine, despite the fact that I did escape one day this week and went for a coronavirus test. That was 5 days after I got back from the USA. It was negative. So there's no earthly reason why I should still be quarantining for a further 5 days. And yet, they're the government rules, which kind of sums up this madness. I mean, what a mess. And you can read today's newspapers and you can believe what you want to believe. But here are the facts. We're going through the biggest peacetime economic crisis in history. The clock is running down to the end of Brexit negotiations, and yet the girls and boys in Westminster are all busy playing games, all trying to stab each other in the back. Who are the winners? Well, tough to work out, but it does look like we now have a second queen. Carrie is now the second Queen of England and clearly has the ear of Boris and is influencing policy in the most extraordinary way. Now look, Dominic Cummings, to be honest, I never liked the bloke. Wasn't just the scruffiness, it was the fact that he was actually pretty arrogant. And was he a genius? No, not really a genius, but certainly bright. Because every one of those slogans, I mean, take back control, for example. I remember UKIP first used that back in 1998. And everything he did in the referendum and in the very successful general election campaign, in which, of course, we stood aside in those Conservative seats, all of it came from the UKIP and Brexit Party playbook. And yet never at any point could he acknowledge that, because that really wouldn't fit the script of genius, would it? But he was bright enough to recognise the things that we'd got right. And clearly, his entire career, his success was based on Brexit. I'd have been quite happy for him to go on the 1st of January. For him to go and Lee Kane to go right now, when no final decision has been made, is bad news, because the Leavers are leaving Downing Street. So who's going to really influence Boris over the course of the next days and weeks? And I say influence because the one thing we know about Boris Johnson, I know personally from trying to work with him, is he simply cannot make decisions. He's always worried about short-term unpopularity. A Margaret Thatcher or a Winston Churchill, he most certainly is not. And the big influences now, with Cummings gone, with Kane gone, well, of course it's going to be Queen Carrie and Allegra Stratton, the new presswoman, the new boss of press. Now, she's on a personal level absolutely delightful. Used to write for The Guardian, used to work for the BBC, says she voted leave. I wouldn't be quite so sure. And these will now be the influences on Boris Johnson. If you add to that the likelihood that the duffer, Joe Biden, is going to become the next US president and has said already that our relationship with the USA will depend on how happy Brussels and Dublin are with the deal, you can see right now that Brexit is in great peril. Now, of course, all the commentariat, all the people who are part of that chumocracy on the so-called centre-right of British public life say, no. Boris is absolutely determined to deliver the right kind of Brexit. Well, we heard that, did we not, with Mrs. May. And I mentioned the chumocracy. Isn't it funny that the very same people, they can be lobbyists, they can be journalists, they can be politicians, and they're all completely interchangeable. We're beginning to see some of the PPE contracts that were given out to their mates. We're beginning to understand just how much public money has been given to Rupert Soames, his company Serco. He, of course, a grandson of Winston Churchill. And you begin to understand that the whole country is being run by this little tight-knit club of people. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them went to the same school. And frankly, I think when we look back on this, we'll be appalled at this narrow clique that are running our country. Now, as I say, we're heading into the last stages of this Brexit negotiation. Every day you hear about fishing. Every day you hear about state aid rules, indeed, even level playing fields. Tell you what no one's talking about, because it wouldn't suit anybody in a chumocracy to even talk about this. I mean, goodness gracious me, let alone mention it at a Notting Hill dinner party. I'm going to use this word. It may offend you on a Sunday evening. Immigration. What in the final Brexit deal is going to make any difference to the free movement of people? I wonder. I suspect very little indeed. And while we're on it, well, it's gale strewn today, so they're not coming into Dover. But well over 8,000 this year that we know of have come across the English Channel in dinghies. They're coming back this Friday, by the way. I've seen the forecast. Not that we'll do a single thing about it. But think on this. We are now housing in hotels, private housing, and a couple of former army camps. We're now housing 56,000 illegal immigrants. And unless we get the right Brexit deal, nothing will change from January the 1st at all. Now, there are those that will tell you that with Cummings gone, there's a bright new future for Boris and the Conservative Party. They're going to go green. There's a big green speech coming up this week from Boris. They're going to go big on greenery. They're going to go big on trans rights. They're going to go big on generally not causing offence to anybody, and I've no doubt taking the knee to BLM and other Marxist organisations. Don't they understand, because Cummings did, don't they understand that it's the red wall voters, every one of whom had previously voted UKIP or voted for the Brexit Party, that gave Boris the majority of 80. They are not interested in taxpayer-funded green ideas that might be popular with Zach Goldsmith and Carrie, but the idea is going to create jobs. Now, actually, it will cost jobs. People want our borders controlled, a proper Brexit delivered. And I fear that if Boris is now being convinced by those around him that a fresh, new, lovely sort of Cameroon approach to everything. Let's be cuddly and fluffy and lovely and popular in central London. If he thinks that is going to save his political career, he's in for the most almighty shock. I think what you've seen over the course of the last week is the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson, the beginning of the end for a Conservative government that just a year ago got a majority of 80 and has done absolutely nothing with it at all. And I fear there are going to be more Brexit battles to fight in the years to come. I'm not going to stand by and just let this thing be, just run into the long grass for us not to get the benefits that Brexit should give us. I won't do that without standing up and fighting. I hope that you won't do that without fighting back as well. If I'm wrong, then tell me at the end of December that I'm an idiot and I should have trusted Boris all the way through. But I'll make this prediction right now. Brexit is in peril.